a blessed new moon, the first day of the month Kislev. We finished the month of Sheshvan. Now it's Kislev. We had Tishri the other month, which was the 7th. Sheshvan was the 8th, and now we are in the 9th month, Kislev, which is another blessed month, which is a ceremonial Pentecost. When we say ceremonial Pentecost, we mean that that's when the Gentiles will have their own Pentecost. So we have a Pentecost after this month, which comes on one of the weeks following. And if you can check on your calendars, you'll find ceremonial Pentecost. It only means the Gentiles will have their own Pentecost, their own day of Pentecost of receiving the latter rain. So it coincides with this month, which is the month of the 9th month of Kislev. So I want to welcome you all for this first day of the month, which is the month of Kislev, the 9th month. And we will continue like this even in the new heaven and in the new earth, as it says in Isaiah 66, from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another. So this is how God is preparing us for the mentions above, so that we continue in that system. This is the heavenly system, so we will enjoy being, ushered in the kingdom with all these heavenly systems. So today we have got a lovely question which says, who is Israel by promise? Because we have seen a lot of people calling themselves Israel, Israel, Israel. So we want to know who is Israel by promise, right? We know Sabbath keepers call themselves spiritual Israel. So this is the one that we are asking, because when God comes, we have to join in with the Christians who are spiritual Israel. So we are saying it's the antitype of the other Israel which was there. So what is it that was there in the previous Israel, which was Israel by flesh? And we have Israel, spiritual Israel, which is Israel by promise, which the Christians should be saying, we are now sons of Abraham. We are, as you have, Galatians chapter 3, verse 29 says, if you be Christ, ye are the children of Abraham. That's the Israel by promise. But who are they? Because everyone is saying, oh, Galatians is for me, involves me to be a son of Abraham. So, but who are the sons of Abraham, or who is Israel by promise? Because we know the Christians have also been told that if they are Christians, they will be sons of Abraham. So this one is the Israel by promise. But let's study and see we identify who Israel by promise is. We are going to start from Testimonies, Volume 6, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 6, page 195, there where it's under that page. Start where he's saying this experience of the Israelites. We want to start to see the experience of the Israelites, how they walked, how they lived. It will give us a copy of who is Israel now by promise, who is spiritual Israel amongst the Christians. Now, if you start from the topic on today's topic, right, who is Israel by promise, start where he's saying this experience. That's the testimonies I'm looking for, right?
This experience of the Israelites,
right,
in departing from Egypt, was written for the instruction of those who live in the last days.
Right. So testimonies for the church says that the experience that they walked in the wilderness, they stayed in Canaan, was only written for the true Israel by promise. So that's why we have to study their experience to identify who is Israel by promise among the Christian community. So we want to get the Israel by promise. Now, their experience, Testimonies for the Church, Volume 6, page 195, says, this experience of the Israelites, right? Which experience of the Israelites? That's why we paraphrase and say, in departing from Egypt, was written for the instruction of those who should live in the last days. So who are living in the last days? It's us. But we have an experience of Israel by a promise, or spiritual Israel, which should come from the type. So that Israel which came out of Egypt is a type. So it's a copy of what we should be when we want to follow Christ and be the spiritual Israel. Right?
Before the overflowing scourge
right,
shall come upon the dwellers of the earth,
right,
the Lord calls upon all who are Israelites indeed to prepare for that event.
Right. So those who are Israelites indeed, or by promise, or spiritual Israel among the Christians, who will endure the copy what it was like with the Israel of old. These are the ones that are being called by God, so that upon the dwellers of the earth, the Lord calls upon all who are Israelites indeed to prepare for that event. What event? For the coming of Christ. You understand? Now, we want to paraphrase from 1 Esau 64.1. There it says, the 12 tribes.
The 12 tribes of Israel, after the flesh, are but a type of Israel by the promise.
Right.
The 144,000.
Right. So we are talking about the 144,000 brethren. These are the ones that we found now standing with Christ on Mount Zion, who were the true Israel, because they were coming from the 12 tribes. We saw in Revelation chapter 7. They were being sealed from the 12 tribes of Israel. So these 144,000 should be exactly a copy of what it was when they walked out of Egypt. It should be exactly the same. Now, as there were Gentiles.
As there were Gentiles among Israel, the type.
Right.
There will be Gentiles in Israel, the true.
Right. And the type, we had a section which was Israel. And then a section which was non-Israel. We remember when the Good Samaritans, they were not Israelites, those ones. You know? You remember this one who was praying, this other one in Acts chapter, this guy who was praying, who was an Italian, yeah? Cornelius, right. You remember, he was not an Israelite, he was a Gentile. Now, the experience of the setup which was there, we had Israel and we had Gentiles in the type, in those who were walking out of Egypt. We had mixed multitudes, we had Israel, we had Gentiles. Now, in our experience at the end, we will have Israel, or those who are 10 commandment keeping, and who say they are spiritual Israel now, though they are not by flesh there, but they are now assumed to be the 144,000 who come among them, which are the Sabbath keepers. And then we also have those who are not among the Sabbath keepers as Gentiles. So that was the setup. That was the setup in the Old Testament, right? The early, we want to proceed on a second paragraph there on 64. The early part of the Christian church, yeah?
The early part of the Christian church, the apostolic time, could not be called Israel.
Right. So we saw the other day when we set up the chart on the first brass mountain, or the church which was established by Christ before he went up to heaven. Those could not be termed Israel. The early Christian church, they could not be termed Israel. Right? Right. Why? Repeat that one.
The early part of the Christian church, the apostolic time, could not be called Israel. For the history of the church then was typified by Isaac according to Galatians 4 verse 22 to 31.
We remember what was there initially. Abraham had a son called Isaac. So Isaac was not Israel. Do you remember? So there was a portion of the children of Abraham which were under the title Isaac. Then after Isaac, what did we have? Jacob. Jacob is the one who was named Israel. You remember that day when he fought with the angel, when he was fleeing from Esau, going to his uncle, running away from Esau. When he slept, he saw a ladder going to heaven, isn't it? And also another thing, we saw that he fought with the angel. And he thought it was just an ordinary man, and they fought really a real good fight. But in the middle of the fight, that angel paralyzed him. And he just realized, no, this is no ordinary human being, because it's now paralyzed me. So he discovered that, no, it was an angel coming from God. And then he had to ask for a blessing, and the blessing was, he was now changed. His name was changed to what? Israel. Changed from Jacob to Israel. So the name Israel does not come under Isaac. It comes under Jacob. Jacob is the one who had to have, you remember how Laban cheated him. He worked for 7 years to get the first wife, which was Leah. But he was working for Rachel, so he was cheated. And then next thing, he worked again another 7 years to get the very Rachel. So all those 2 wives, and also the 2 wives had servants. I know there was Zilpah and Bilhah, one of each. Those servants also bear children for Jacob. And also we have children from Leah, the first wife, and children from Rachel. So all those 4 wives, that's what was with Jacob. All those 4 women, they bear the children for Israel, the children for Jacob, which are now amongst the 12 tribes of Israel. They are the pioneers of the 12 tribes of Israel. They came from those 4 women, and they were standing as a type. We remember the first type was the legitimate wife, which is Leah, which is coming under. So where are the 144,000 going to come from? One from the legitimate wife of God, which are the Sabbath keepers. We will have children coming from Sabbath keepers. And also the second wife, which is Rachel, also bear, Benjamin and Joseph, they were coming from Rachel, which was not a legitimate wife. It was a second wife. It was not in the Bible, legitimate wife is the first wife. So this one is an apostate, which is another one who will produce the children of Israel, but they also should meet the standard first for them to be sealed into the 144,000. Also these servants, Zilpah and Bilhah, the servants also bear other children. And when they bear other children, they come also from other fallen worlds or from other Gentiles, who by the time of the sealing will be sealed and be Sabbath keepers before they receive the seal. So where are these children of Israel coming from? From these 4 women. But they were under the husband called Jacob, not Isaac. So why did we have these children? Isaac, a period of having Isaac, and then a period of having Jacob under Abraham, is because we have the early Christian church, which also is represented by Isaac. And then we have the last church, which we saw, the church triumphant, which will be represented by Jacob. So it's so clear who Israel is. Israel comes from Jacob, not from Isaac. So why did we have those 2 brass mountains the other day? In Zechariah chapter 6, 2 brass mountains. One represent the early Christian church. 2, the second one, church triumphant, which will meet Christ. So all of these 2 brass mountains are represented. The first one by Isaac, the second one by Jacob. So Jacob produces now the 144,000 coming from these different women, right? So we should know exactly why God had to come up with 144,000 coming from the children of Israel. Why? Where are these children of Israel originating from? They are originating from Jacob, whose wives, the first one legit, the second one Rachel, first one is Leah, Rachel, and then Zilpah and Bilhah. All you go to the Old Testament, you will find all that. I was seeing somebody saying, we don't need the Old Testament now, we only need the New Testament. But all the basics are in the Old Testament. So without it, you can't understand where the 144,000 are coming from. You can't understand what is happening in our time. So you have to be fully versed with the Old Testament for you to understand the New, for you to know exactly the position where you are. You should know all that. Now, let's go to It says, according to Galatians chapter 4, verse 22, obviously is giving us the chronology of the mother's Sarah, who is a spiritual mother, who is going to bear the son Isaac. And next we go to to Rebecca bearing the child who is called Jacob and Esau. Esau is not even anywhere in the mark of the 144,000. He just went his way. But we are now interested in Jacob, who bear 144,000. So this is a long study, which you and I will take a lot of weeks to understand. Who is Israel by promise? Who is it that is supposed to be called Israel in the last days? Yeah? So we see among the Christians people who will resemble exactly what it was in the Old Testament. And these are the ones that are going to meet Christ. As the 144,000 we see, they are going to meet Christ. They are standing with Christ on Revelation 14, verse 1, on Mount Zion. So they are Israel by promise. But let's go and step by step and understand how things went until we see who is going to meet Christ, who is the promised Israel, right? So we saw that the early Christian church was resembled by Isaac, right? And then God to Isaac was not called Israel, right? It's just the points that I was saying, yeah? There after pages 53 too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac was not called Israel,
right?
For he was the father of Jacob,
right?
And it was Jacob who was called Israel,
right?
Therefore, Israel, whatever part of the church it is, must come sometime later in the history of the church.
So when do we expect this spiritual Israel? Sometime later, near the coming of Christ. So we expect, because Isaac initially was not the father of, was not Israel, but he was the father of Jacob, whose name is called Israel. So Israel comes from Jacob after fighting that angel, and he was called Israel. And then those children coming from him are the 12 tribes of Israel. And then we see in our time we have 144,000 coming from the 12 tribes of Israel. So we should understand where are we getting it. And we have that basis from the Old Testament and then understand what is in the New Testament, the prophecies. But we cannot just start with the New Testament without knowing where they are coming from. Right? And read on. Mm-hmm. So to those who are going to understand these lessons fully, they will have the whole Bible from the Old to the New, knowing exactly the logistics, what God is at, without just knowing one verse and just running with it, without knowing the logistics behind that. Right? Mm-hmm.
Jacob was the father of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right.
And if Israel, after the flesh, is a type of Israel by the promise, which is the true, then let us start at the beginning of Israel after the flesh.
Right.
If we are to locate or to know Israel by the promise,
if we want to know the Israel, the spiritual Israel, go to the Israel after the flesh, their history in the Bible, and then we understand Israel, spiritual Israel. So we cannot just say we are spiritual Israel without understanding where they are coming from. You understand? So it's a beautiful study that we should have in these coming weeks. We should enjoy this study, right? And we go to the next paragraph, point 3.
The journey of Israel down into Egypt could not have been an accident.
That journey from walking out of Egypt. You know, you see, remember how they got into Egypt? Through Joseph. When Joseph was sold by his brothers and they went into Egypt. And then they multiplied there. So that history of them coming out there and going to possess Canaan, it's not an accident. It was written for a purpose. Now read on, let's hear.
The journey of Israel down into Egypt could not have been an accident. Whatever the reason for it, God was in it.
God was in it. Pillar of fire by night, a pillar of cloud, a cloud by day. Why was he in that movement? Why? Why would God be in it for the next generation? Like what Sister White said, it was for those who will meet Christ in the last days. So that was their copy, right?
Joseph said to his brothers, Now, therefore be ye not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that ye sold me hither.
Right?
For God did send me before you to preserve life.
Now, this is Genesis chapter 45, verse 5. It says, Don't be angry that you sold me. You remember what had happened? From the prison where Joseph had been sent because of an allegation that he had raped Pharaoh's wife, which was a wrong allegation. So he went in prison, but two men had dreams and he interpreted these dreams. I won't go fully into the story, you know it. And then when the other one who was interpreted to have been killed was killed, and the other one was going to be released, so was released. But Joseph had said, you also remember me where you go, right? So God, by providence, made Pharaoh have a dream of those seven. We will study more about it in this typology. It's a typology, because those are the types for this movement in the last days, or the 144,000 movement. So when Pharaoh had a dream of those 7 cows which were very fat, and then next the other ones were lean, or they were wasted, thin. So, but he didn't understand, because those who were lean had to eat those who were fat. So he didn't understand that dream. You remember, you can go to the Old Testament and find out about the dream. But that dream troubled Pharaoh. And that man now, we knew there was somebody who interprets dreams in the prison, who is Joseph. That's how he was brought up from the prison, and then interpreted the dream. And after interpreting the dream, what did he say? He says there will be plenty years of food in the 7 years of the cows which were fat. And then next, after that, we will have years of famine, 7 years again. That's why the animals, the cows which were lean, are the ones who ate the fat ones. But what was it symbolic of? That those in the New Testament should eat from the ones in the Old which were fat. So you understand that we cannot do anything without the Old Testament. That's why we are in the period, in the New Testament period, where the lean cows are. It was the Old and New Testament, those 7 cows. The 7 are in the Old Testament, the 7 in the New Testament. But the lean ones in the New Testament will be fed by those in the Old Testament. So if you cannot understand the Old Testament, you will never understand the New. So you see where we are coming from to discover who is Israel by promise. We have to understand from the fat cows, which is the Old Testament. So this dream made Joseph a governor. So he was now made a ruler of Egypt. And on the 7 years of famine, truly there was famine in the whole world, and the whole world was coming to buy corn from Joseph. So, and also the brothers who sold him came to buy corn from him. And he realized it. And you really know how everything happened, how the cup was also put in the bags, and they realized they've got the cup of the covenant, how he troubled them, but in a way wanting to make sure they know exactly what they did. That's why in Genesis 45 verse 5 he's saying, don't worry about the fact that you sold me. It was for a purpose. So it was for another purpose, a great purpose in our time. In the New Testament period, we are feeding on the Old Testament. Prophecies. Daniel is in Old Testament. If you do not understand Daniel, you can't understand Revelation. I can see people saying we only need the Old Testament, the New Testament. But without the Old Testament, that's where the prophecies are. All the prophecies are. Zechariah 6, we saw the other day, is in the Old Testament. All the prophecies on why did they have this woman, and why did they have this wife, and this child, 2 children who were fighting in the womb. And we saw it in another prophecy that it was the Church of God. It's got 2 children, one Jacobites and other one Esau. So who are they? All that is you feed from the Old Testament, but if you want to start from the New Testament, you won't understand what you are talking about. That's why you find people are a bit confused, especially in the laws. They think the Old Testament came to eradicate the New Testament eradicated all the laws in the Old Testament. And yet Christ said in Matthew chapter 5 verse 17, think not I have come to change all the laws. No, he came to fulfill them, to make sure they are kept. And how did he fulfill them? He says, you heard that in the past that an eye was for an eye, but now I'm saying, if they beat the other cheek, give the other cheek. That's a law being fulfilled. And we heard that when you are saying somebody has committed adultery, it was just the act itself. But I'm saying it's not the act only, but even what is in your brain. So you see, it was making full force to the law again. So far from it when you think he came to change the law and the prophet. He said two things, the law and the prophets. He didn't come to change. So when they saw Christ, they said, okay, the law now is going to be nullified. And also the prophets, which are there in the Old Testament, they ended with John. But says, no, I did not come to delete. They are there in the Old Testament, they are there in the New. So if the prophets are there in the Old and the New, did not come to remove them. So we have to read the Old Testament and be fortified with the Old Testament for us to understand the New. Now, for us to understand who is Israel by promise, or Israel, the spiritual Israel, we have to go back to the type. When they walked out of Egypt, it was not just a coincidence or an incident happening. It was for us to know that it was our copy. Right, let's read.
Joseph declares that God was the cause for him going into Egypt.
Right.
God had also told Abraham that he and his seed would sojourn and be afflicted in a strange land for 430 years.
He had already told them. Why he told Abraham when he was called that him and his seed, from the time he was called, he was going to stay 430 years sojourning in the land of Egypt. He had promised that. So why was it now we enjoy the prophecies of the 430 years and they tell us where we are? Once you do not know those prophecies of 430 years, why Abraham was called and spent 430 years, and why Luther, he was also a man of faith, righteousness by faith, and Abraham, Luther being a type of Abraham, you understand? So which 430 years he had been sent, all that, the copy is in the Old Testament. You understand? So for you to understand the New, you will never dance around with the New without the Old. You really have to match things when you go along, right?
But why did God send them into Egypt?
Right.
Why was Joseph sold at the age of 17?
Right.
Merely a lad, into the hands of
and
cruel
when
Ishmaelites.
You see even the call of Sister White, what age was she? 17. So when you see things happening in the New Testament, you should go to the Old Testament and find out. So why did God call Joseph at the age of 17? And then we find even in our time, he's calling Sister White at the age of 17. You understand? Go to the New Eastern and find out the history about Sister White. It's there under the pioneers, the founders of the Sabbath keeping. You will find Sister White is there, and her history, she was called at 17, and now we are seeing 17 years, Joseph is being called. Now, why did all that happen? Now, read on.
Why was Joseph sold at the age of 17, merely a lad, into the hands of cruel Ishmaelites, and lead to a strange land to be resold as a slave?
Why? Why did all that happen? It should come to our minds when we read the Old Testament to find all that. Why did this happen? Right?
We certainly would not make a mistake by thinking that Joseph became faint-hearted on the way. There surely must have been a reason for all this ill treatment.
Right. All the treatment which was done to Joseph by his brothers, there was a reason. Why would God permit it? Why did he permit Joseph without even doing anything to Potiphar's wife? be accused and then sent to prison. Why would he allow all that? And then from prison comes up to be a governor. Why did God allow all that? So I'm asking you, who is Israel? By promise. We have to dig deeper from the Old Testament to find out what is happening in the New. Let me tell you, we will find out until our own time and until the future time to us, so that we are well vexed with the scriptures and we understand exactly what is happening. Right? In Egypt, it's all about the history of the Israelites, right? In Egypt.
In Egypt, Joseph was sold to serve as a slave.
Right?
And later was thrown into the dungeon for a number of years.
We saw it.
Why did God lead Israel into that strange land?
Why?
Where idolatry prevailed everywhere.
Why did he do that?
God certainly knew that in that land they would become slaves in just a short while.
Right. He knew how many years they're going to stay in that land as slaves. He knew exactly. Why did he allow them to go through all that? These were his beloved people. He could have just taken them. Even when the years of famine were there, he could have just nourished them in their own land. But he allowed them to go right through, to go in every corner, whether it is dark or it is wicked or whatever. He allowed them to go all the way. Why? Right? And
God certainly knew that in that land they would become slaves in just a short while.
Right?
Why would heaven allow God's chosen people to become servants to a nation whose idols were their God? Why did God permit the lashes of the Egyptian taskmasters to be applied upon the backs of his people?
They were being beaten just for bricklaying. Beaten. When they are tired, come on, get going. Why did God allow that? So that why would he allow, if they were his peculiar people? Why? Right?
Why would divine love permit the children of Abraham, God's friend, while yet in infancy, to be drowned in the river Nile?
Right. They were drowned in the river Nile. That was the treatment, isn't it? Now, why would he allow that? Right?
Who can say our great God was ignorant of all these things which took place, or that he made a mistake?
Was it a mistake? That he's just thought of something, of an evil plan somewhere which just came? And what?
The only answer that can be offered is that it was all heavenly designed.
That was all heavenly designed. So that journey through, from the call of Abraham to the entering in of Egypt, coming out of Egypt, back to Canaan, and also in Canaan, back to Babylon, and Babylon, back, only the Jews went back, and also the 10 tribes scattered all over. Why did he allow that? You understand?
But what was it all about? God must have had some special reason and specific purpose for an object lesson to be taught at a certain time.
There was a specific object lesson to be taught at the later time, when you're about to enter the pearly gates. Right? And what?
One may say God did it all to show his power.
Was it just to display his power?
But would he, all-wise and great God, full of love and mercy, destroy his children to show his power?
Only to show how powerful he is. Would he just do all that only to display his power? And what?
Not even an earthly, mortal human father would dare destroy his children to show his power. You can't do that to your own children.
So would God do that just to display his power? Right?
Who would they say human beings have greater love or better judgment than the great God?
Who can say we have got love? We love our children who we didn't even know how they were being formed in our belly, more than God, who actually forms them in our belly. Who would have more love? And what?
Who would dare say human beings have greater love or better judgment than the great God whose mercy is immeasurable, whose love fills the universe, whose wisdom is unsearchable, and whose judgment is justice?
Right? Not only
His chosen suffered of bondage and cruelty, but the Egyptians as well. At the time of the Exodus movement,
right?
at the departure of Israel, the plagues came upon all Egypt.
Yeah, we remember the 10 plagues. They all came. The first 3 they enjoyed together, but the last 7 they came to Egypt. Frogs everywhere, lice. Yeah, they saw what all the plagues that came for the Israelites to come out of Egypt. They also enjoyed them, isn't it? So, right, and
at the time of the Exodus movement, at the departure of Israel, the plagues came upon all Egypt, and the nation was nearly ruined. On the night of the Passover, there was death in every dwelling place where there was no blood on the doorpost, and in every stall of beasts.
Right? Right. Let's go to Exodus chapter 11, verse 5.
Verse 5. And all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon the throne, even unto the firstborn of the maid servant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts.
You see, all this happened. It happened. Why was it happening? This is what we have to dig deeper to find out the history of the Old Testament, so that we find out who is Israel by promise. We will find out at the end of this lesson who is it, right? Go to 66.1.
Israel journeyed to the Red Sea, and Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the waters were divided.
Right.
Israel went into the sea and walked across over dry
ground. Why did that happen? Why? Because we're finding later on in an Exodus of the last days, people walking in dry. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 11. Start from verse 15. We find the dry land again. People walking in a second Exodus.
Verse 15. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea.
Right.
And with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the seven streams.
Yeah.
And make men go over dry shod.
So we see another second Exodus in future to Isaiah, which is telling us Isaiah didn't walk out of Egypt. He was born later after the Exodus. But it's talking about another Exodus where there is a dry shod or dry land, people walking on dry land. But we are seeing from the previous, they did it when they were walking out of Egypt. And when they crossed the Red Sea, it was on dry land. That's why it is correct for us to find out who is going to walk on dry land in future to Isaiah, and as a copy, as an antitype of what happened when they walked out of Egypt, crossed the Red Sea on dry land. Without that, brethren, you will never find out where you are going, or whenever you are lost, you won't find out you are lost. You have to find out from the type which was laid for us. So we have to study this typology from the Old Testament, right?
The Egyptians pursued after them to the midst of the sea, and Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots, horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh, which came into the sea after them. They remained not so much as one of them.
Right. So this happened. It's an incident which happened in the Old Testament, in the first movement. So the second movement should be exactly the same as the first. Now, let's go to point 2 of the same, from 66.2.
Israel came into the wilderness where they wandered about 40 years.
Right.
Thousands of them perished because of unbelief.
Right. We have a wilderness also in our time. Right? We saw the wilderness when we were studying the 430 years. The wilderness is from the time we rejected the 1888 message to the next time when we received the message where the Revelation chapter 7, an angel coming from the east, where there was a writing, VT whatever, introduced. It was exactly a 40-year wilderness. There was nothing. After rejecting the message in 1888, nothing remained. There was no new message which came. It was still the old one of the Sabbath that Sister White had preached in 1844. So God gave them 80 Johns and Wagona to top up the message from Sister White. We wouldn't stay. Listen, those who lived when William Miller was called, it was 1831 he was called, isn't it? Soon after 1831, after William Miller was called, who was called next? Sister White. What year was Sister White called? It was in 1844. But do you see, from 1831 to 1844, it's hardly 20 years. So from Sister White's call, how many years are there until today? How many years? So do you really think there was no message in between from Sister White to 2020 today? Do you think there was no message? There was a lot of rejection. People were in the wilderness, and still some want to continue in the wilderness. And you know, the Israelites, when they were in the wilderness, most of them didn't want to go to Canaan. Most of them continuously cried to Moses, we want to return back to Egypt. We want to return. They did not want to cross over to Canaan. You remember the 12 spies? 10 of them came saying, no, we cannot go. These people are strong. We can't fight them. They are like the sons of Anak. We cannot. There's really giants and whatever. 10 of them refused. But only 2, Joshua and Caleb, remained saying, no, we will go. They did not want to go to Canaan. They wanted to enjoy wilderness, just the wilderness. And when God wanted to give them a sign to say that they are now going to cross, so God made sure that they will cross. So he started, stopping all their supplies in the wilderness, the supply of food, the supply of water. Instead, what did they do? They caused Moses to err and said to Moses, give us water. And that's why Moses was angry. Now he hit the stone twice. Why? Because these people did not want their supplies to be stopped. Barely there was nothing stopped. It was just a few abundance. Now what is happening to us? Are our supplies being stopped? Yes. We have a lot of things being reduced by God. Reduced just in our period. We have a lot of things. Some people are jobless. Some people are... there's a lot of, warning to show that we are now about to enter. But how many want to cross over? Or how many want to join the 10? We will say we will not cross over. We will not go to Canaan. We will not what? People are enjoying, are now at stake. Some, have established themselves to stay forever in the wilderness. But we are in the wilderness. We are supposed to hop over anytime. So here we are seeing there was a 40 years of wilderness sojourn. Why? Because of unbelief. Now we had it also. After 1888, we have a sojourn unbelief. Nothing came. Until today, nothing came except what came with Sister White in 1844. So we have, since 1844, nothing new came from God. Nothing except apostasy coming to ruin us with all these new things which are not in the Bible. This is what is coming. That's why I'm saying Babylon is fallen, because all the things, all the apostasies that were invading us from 1844, that's why God is saying we are now Babylon. Why? Because nothing new came from him. Instead, what are we holding on to? Apostasies and apostasies coming, or things that you can't find in the Bible. Now, but those very elect will know that soon after 1888 was rejected, in 1930 the message came, right? At least they had something that came than those who are still daily imbibing into error, because there's nothing new coming. You understand? So, because if there's something new, which message then came after Sister White? Nothing. So we're saying we are ready from 1844 until 2020. We are still ready with that message which was there was no gap which was more than 20 years from each message being erased by God. Even from William Miller, from Martin Luther, you will find he was not the last one to reform. God raised another guy, John Knox, and then after John Knox, raised another guy, Charles and John Wesley. After Charles and John Wesley, Campbell was raised. And next, what was it? After that, William Miller. and after that, Sister White. So after Sister White, then there's this large gap. Something wrong somewhere. Something is wrong somewhere. You have to keep up with the light. The scroll continues to roll in heaven. It continues to roll. The fact that we say there is no prophet, it means we are now stagnant with error. Stagnant. Nothing is coming. When nothing comes, the devil brings his own new light. All these new errors coming, which are nowhere found in the Bible, are what should raise an alarm into our lives. Because nothing is coming as new. No other prophet is coming. Where in the church history has God had a prophet who dies and then rejected the ones who are living and say, now we can stay without a prophet? Which period is that? Only now, then, when the devil wants to fool us and say there's no more. So, but if there's no more no more prophet, then why are we having pastors? Why are we having evangelists? Because all the gifts were given at one time. So why are we having all that? It should be no more for everything, isn't it? But why if no more only to prophet, who is the voice of God? But plenty, numerous evangelists, numerous pastors, but the prophet is nowhere. It should raise an alarm into our brain to say God has never stayed in any period. Check where a prophet dies and then hands over even his books. You know, Jeremiah was a prophet. When he died, somebody was raised. Ezekiel was a prophet. When he died, somebody was raised. Isaiah. Even when Christ came, he was a great prophet. When he left, there was someone who took over. Now, this time when the world is so dark as whatever, we have nothing. It should raise an alarm. If we have nothing, so why do we have pastors? If we have no one, the gifts are all finished, why do we have pastors? Ask yourself. If they are all given at the same time when Christ went to heaven, so why should we have this? Why? Where is the verse which says now you remain only with pastors? In all these 8 gifts, you only remain. Where is it? Where do you find it in the Bible? This is my argument. Where are you finding it? That all the gifts are gone, we only remain with pastors. Where is it? I want to find out where it is. And someone will say, okay, no man can be a pastor. No man can lead the church. But where is it that the pastor is going to lead the church? Because in the Bible it's the priest. Timothy is talking about the priest and the bishop, isn't it? It's the bishop. So where is it that you are talking about a woman not being a pastor? Where? And only a man to be a pastor. You don't take Timothy to mean the pastors only. It means the bishops. So a bishop is not a pastor, is it? Is it a pastor? No. Let's not cheat there. Let's not cheat each other. The gifts are still there until Christ comes. That's it. End of. Those who are the very elect, the 144,000, will be led by a prophet. Why? Because in Revelation chapter 12, verse 17, it says they are led by a prophet. It says they keep the commandments and have a prophet, or have the testimony of Jesus, which is a prophet. So I do not know where we get it, that they are now all gone except one gift is still lingering in front and saying, I'm now the voice of God. It has never been. A voice of the pastor has never been the voice of God. The voice of God is in Amos chapter 3, verse 7. It says, I have a secret, I speak to the prophet. He will not do anything without revealing the secret to the prophet. He has never said any other gift there. So let's be clear with the reading and understanding. It's simple to understand the Bible. We make it so difficult by strong words and whatever and confuse yourself. But do not make it difficult. Make it simple and understandable, like what it was with Christ. Just it is written. Straightforward, yes, without any scatology or whatever in there. So don't make it confusing to people. Confuse yourself first and confuse everyone. So let's read. Israel came into the wilderness.
Israel came into the wilderness where they wandered about 40 years.
Right?
Thousands of them perished because of their unbelief.
Yeah.
At the end of the wilderness journey, the people crossed the Jordan during the time Israel was away from Canaan.
Right?
The land was thickly inhabited by heathen nations. Israel was compelled to destroy them by the sword, in order to possess the land.
Right?
Think of the loss of life, grief and suffering, all because God took Israel into Egypt and brought them back again. God certainly would not destroy his subjects just to show his power.
No. He wouldn't just do all that for sure. You remember it was inhabited by the Jebus, the Girgasites. All those were not Israel, but they were all destroyed so that Israel walked into Canaan. Why would God be interested in all that? Why? There was a reason. And let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11 to 12.
Verse 11. Now, all these things happened unto them for ensamples.
Why did all these things happen? They happened because of what?
For ensamples.
It was an example.
And they are written for our admonition.
It is written for us to understand what happened.
Upon whom the ends of the world are come.
Especially us upon the last days. We are in the last days. We had that whole history of Egypt going out of Israel, going out of Egypt. For us to understand what is happening in our time, in the last days. It's there, verse 12.
Wherefore, let him that thinketh he standeth,
right?
Take heed lest he fall.
Right. So, let him, those who think they are Israel by promise, match themselves with the sample. The ensample is there for us. Now, if you do something otherwise, which was not in the design of Israel, then you are doing something which is wrong. You are no longer Israel by faith. You are no longer Israel, spiritual Israel by promise. You are no longer. Once anything is not there, for instance, when I say they were all circumcised Israelites. In Genesis chapter 17, Abraham was told, all your seed is going to be circumcised. And you tell me that I will just worship God without circumcision. Take heed. There was no type for that. There is no type. Have you seen anyone calling himself Israel who is not circumcised? There is no type to it. It happened as a sample on which the end shall come. And we should take heed and make sure all this matches what we are. Right? And let's read on.
If we are the people upon whom the end of the world is to come, then their ensamples are written for our admonition.
Right?
This is the reason why God led the children of Israel into Egypt and back again. Think how great the price to work out the picture.
Right?
The lessons to be derived from these great examples are far greater than we have ever realized.
The lessons behind that Exodus only. You cannot just tell it as a story and finish and say story time is finished, ended, go and sleep. It has a lot into our lives. It has a lot in the salvation, in the plan of salvation. It has a lot. It's not just a story to know about Joseph that he refused to lay with Potiphar's wife. It's not. When the Bible says there was now a Pharaoh without Joseph, it should mean a lot. It click a lot. And when we find it in the testimonies, volume 5, page 207, the church has left Christ and still going to Egypt. You should know exactly what the spirit of prophecy is talking about. You should know. It's there to warn us. We have a design already, which we should match with. We cannot be found by God forming another extra Israel, which is not that one. It has to match exactly, because he made that design slow but sure for the design of those who are going to live in the time for the coming of Christ. Now, if you go anywhere astray, it's just a tangent. You have lost it. You have lost it. Now, read on.
Think how great the price to work out the picture. The lessons to be derived from these great examples are far greater than we ever realized.
Right?
Many thousands
lost their lives. Yes.
To produce the picture with the intention that many more thousands would be saved than those who perished.
Right. Why did we have all these Korahs and Datan being swallowed by the whole earth? Why would God have all that design? For what? To display his power. Why would he do that? It was there being made as a sample for the last Israel by promise. Do you understand? So we are going to enjoy this topic. We haven't even started it. We are just introducing how this topic is all about. Who is Israel by promise? Who is it? Because we find some people, oh no, we are Sabbath. These are not Sabbath. These are not. No, we are not talking about that. We are talking about the genuine Israel by promise. Who is it? We have to match it. Then we know who we are. And then let's go to the next point there. It says Pharaoh dreamed. Let's hear. We understand in this verse, Pharaoh had a dream. Remember, it's a longish. But go to Genesis 41, verse 1 to 49. It's a big dream. We have the new moon today. It's a Sabbath. The whole day enjoying the studies from God. So now we have the whole chapter. We will read it like a novel. Yeah? Let's hear this dream.
Pharaoh dreamed.
Right?
And behold, he stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine, and fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow.
I have already explained about this cattle, isn't it? But let's just run down until we finish and we see exactly if I was right or wrong. Yeah?
And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-fledged, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine.
Right. You see, it's not natural for a lean, a small, a big one, a fat one. It's not natural. So it's a dream which needed interpretation.
So Pharaoh awoke, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled.
Right.
And he sent and called for all the magicians of
They
Egypt.
always start with magicians. When there's something, they don't reason. You know, he should have reasoned. But look at where he starts. Even Nebuchadnezzar, where did he start from? Yeah? Pharaoh is so unique because now he has got a dream and he should have known there's God who understands. But look at where he starts with the magicians. They always start with magicians. Let's have an earthquake now. They don't call the men of God. Nothing. They just call, come you have a degree of this, come. You understand? That's all we start from there. And then later on we discovered, oh, this thing was there on verse, on this verse and whatever. The Bible has everything. The history from the Old Testament to the New Testament to the time of the coming of Christ. It's got everything. But where do people start from? Have you got a degree or a what, an MBA or what, a PhD or something? You know, why not start with God? Start with God, right? And
And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof.
You see,
And
they are
Pharaoh-
wise men with the PhDs. They are the ones being called for a dream. Imagine.
And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that
No,
could
they've
interpret them
got their
unto him
degrees.
and
They've
Pharaoh.
got all these things on the wall. But can they interpret a dream? It needed God to interpret that dream.
Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph.
You see, after they've failed, then a man of God is being called. At least Pharaoh had to call a man of God. But some, they just stay without it. So they stay years and years without a solution. They can't go to a man of God. Never. But Pharaoh went to Joseph. You understand?
Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamt a dream, and there is none that can interpret it.
I like Pharaoh. He's so humble, this man. He's talking to a prisoner. Imagine, you take a prisoner from the prison and say, I've dreamt. And you are the ruler talking to a prisoner and say, I dreamt. Please help me. I've got a dream. I like Pharaoh. I don't know whether anyone in his position can do that in our centuries. That will be a humblest person on earth. You understand?
Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream,
Right?
and there is none that can interpret it.
None. At least he saw, he calls and says, I've got magicians, wise people here with degrees and everything. None of them can interpret my dream. But Joseph, a prisoner, who he arrested. is the one who is now begging to interpret the dream. You understand? Pharaoh was more noble, isn't it? Was noble. Knew, I finished with all these, all wasted degrees. I finished with them. But take that prisoner who knows God. You understand?
I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret
You
it.
see, people were talking about Joseph. From that man who he released from the prison, would say, you are going to be released in a couple of days. He went and spread the news that there is a prisoner there. That prisoner is spot on, man, with his God. He's spot on. Do you understand? Until it reached Pharaoh. There is a prisoner who is spot on. Do you understand? Now, the prisoner has been taken. One qualification did Joseph have. One. The Spirit of God. He worshipped God. He knew who he worshipped. That was a qualification more than these magicians and wise men degrees and whatever. Do you know that is the greatest, more than a PhD, to worship God and to know, to understand God? It says so in Jeremiah chapter 9. Let anyone glory. Go to Jeremiah. Let's hear Jeremiah chapter 9. It says so. It says, if there is anyone who glory, from verse 21, what does it say there?
Verse 21.
23, right.
That says the Lord.
That says the Lord.
Let not the wise man
Let not the wise man
glory in his wisdom.
glory in
Neither
whatever.
let the mighty
Listen,
man.
listen, wait there. How many wise men glory with it? You know, you see them with the portfolios as if they're stepping on top of whatever. You understand? Let not the wise men glory in those portfolios. You know, how many people have been buried and left all these degrees on their walls? And God is so correct and He said, do not glory in that. Yes, you can have them, but don't glory in it. Don't put all your faith on it and reject God. Yeah? You can have them as well as God. God should be foremost over everything we have. Over everything. But He says, let not the wise man glory in his what?
In his wisdom.
In his wisdom.
Neither let the mighty man glory
Right?
in his
There are
might.
people who are mighty. How mighty? Some are boxers. They can fight every champions. And when they see you, they just see you like a small snake or something that they step on top. You understand? It's a mighty one. But don't glory in it. That's the admonition from God. Do not glory in that. It's good to have that as long as God is foremost on top of it. Don't glory. You can see people with the high shoulders. See, you understand? Don't glory in that because it's useless. In front of God, it's useless. If you have that as well as God on top of that, then you are the mightiest one. But how many people will just divert their attention only to their mightiness and leave the God? We should glory in having God above our lives. Let the mighty man not glory. Let the wise one. They are somewhat educated until the shoulders are all disabled. They are all on top like this because I'm educated. Don't glory as long as God is not in your life. Don't glory in that. Glory in that as long as God is with you. Then you have the right to glory. Now listen, who should glory?
Let not the rich man
Even there's some who are very rich, you know.
glory in his riches.
They talk about billions, and you know, when a rich person dies, it's a burden, a biggest burden. Do you know what burden is it? People start crying. They are not even crying, mourning for him. They mourn for the riches. The riches, they will be talking about how many Lamborghinis, how many whatever, Rolls, how many, what do you call all those new cars, how many this, how many, and yet that person died and left everything. How many mansions, how many what, instead of people talking about this man, he died a good death, he is with Christ. They're talking about the property and whatever this what, you know. And after they bury that person, do you know what is the next thing? The fight over these properties. It's a burden. That's why God is saying, let no man glory in his riches. It's good to be rich. Job was rich, Abraham was rich, but they had God above them. They put God first above their riches. But there is a tendency now to reject God and concentrate on those riches. Let no man glory in riches, because that's a burden. If God is not in your riches, it's a burden. It's actually a burden. Don't glory in nothing. It's nothing. Let alone people will discover that was useless wastage of time after you die without God and you leave the riches. And anyone who never even worked for the riches possess that. You understand? So it's no point. The only point you should glory in is when I meet my death, I've got God with me. It's not a wastage of life. It's actually winning my life, because when Christ comes, I wake up and go to glory. Do you understand? So let no one, Jeremiah just says, let no one glory in his mightiness. Let no one glory in his riches. Let no one glory in anything that you have. But who should glory then? Yeah?
But let him that glorieth glory in this,
that
he understandeth,
that he really understand the plan of salvation and knoweth God and there's God in his life. That is the person who enjoys life and life in this dark world. Do you understand? Let him who glory that he understands God. That, yeah, when you say blessed new moon, you are there. And you know this is the day of God. It's a Sabbath. You're enjoying the blessings. And the heaven is on a new moon. You are on a new moon. Heaven, we saw the other day when heaven was on a day of Pentecost, they were gathered in Jerusalem. Also, those who gloried in him. That's why he says to 144,000, these are they who worked whithersoever with God. They are always with Christ. They are always where he is there. Where Christ is, they are there. These are the ones who walk with him, not who leave him and glory somewhere without him. No way. Right? When he says today is a Sabbath, you should be with him on a Sabbath. When he says today is a new moon, you should be with him on a new moon. For it was like that. It should be like that. It will be like that in the new heaven and new earth, from one new moon to another. In Isaiah chapter 66, verse 22 up to 24, he says from one new moon to another. From one Sabbath to another. From one Passover to another. To one day of atonement, from Pentecost, from Tabernacle, exactly on the date, to another. That's glorying and understanding who God is. Who is God? You glory in that you understand his plan of salvation. Then you understand you enjoy life in this dark world. You understand? You want to enjoy life in this dark world. Because how many people shed tears when someone has a wasted life? And if yes, someone has died, one, wrong time, wrong place, doing wrong things and wrong things. How is that waste of time reckoned? Do you marvel in such wastage of time? We would rather waste time with God, glorying in God, enjoying. When I meet my death, he is there to wait for me like it was with Moses. When he met his death, he was there waiting for him. Took him up to heaven. That's it. Because he was glorying in being with him. This is what life should be. I don't know why we are being promised by the devil all this, like what he did. He tried to promise Christ and say, I will give you everything. I will give you everything. If you only worship me, I will give you everything. And many people are being promised that promise, but Christ said, men shall not live on bread. Men shall not. What's the point of me getting all this earth and losing my eternal life? What is the point of having all this? Now, how many people know that it's a new moon, but they are busy looking for the riches of the world? What's the point of having all these riches and having no eternal life? What is the point? Now, that's why he says, if this right hand causes you not to enter into the pearly gates, remove it. We would rather go in the pearly gates with the whole body without a hand. You understand? So, let him that glory in that. He understands me. He repeat that last sentence. Let him that glory. What here?
But let him that glorieth glory in this,
right?
That he understandeth and knoweth me.
Yeah.
That I am the Lord, which exercise loving kindness,
right?
Judgment,
right?
And righteousness in the earth.
Amen.
For in these things
right.
I delight, saith the Lord.
There are people who don't understand that much as we have people leading us everywhere, but it's God who should lead. God is leading already, and He is the one who changes people, who rule, who changes leaders, who changes whatever. Whether He is in control of the universe, and time and again He continues to show His presence into our faces. When he talks, He continues to talk in disasters, in earthquakes, in whatever. He is talking. He is there leading. When we go astray, He comes in with judgment. When we are happy with Him, He gives you more blessings. You understand? So all these blessings, they come because God is happy. And when He brings judgment, He's not happy. He is not happy. So He says, those who glory, they should glory in that they understand that I exercise love and judgment. You understand? So we should be getting it to say, is this a blessing? Is it a blessing? Is what has happened? Is it a blessing? No, it's not. It's a judgment. You understand? So we should understand Him. When we understand and glory that we understand that He gives judgment and He gives love. When He says keep the Sabbath, we do it, and He enjoys and gives us more blessing. Keep the new moon, He enjoys it and gives us blessing. That is the person who is supposed to glory. Not the mighty one, not the wise, not the rich. If they do not have God, they only enjoy in the riches or in the mightiness or in the whatever, then they are rejoicing in nothing. It's living a life in vain. That life is just in vain. Now let's read on and go to our dream. Pharaoh had a dream. The magicians, nothing. They couldn't understand this dream. The wise men everywhere, they did not understand this dream. So let's read from where. And Pharaoh told them his dream, where he called Joseph. I have a dream. He's calling a prisoner who was glorying in the presence of God, whether he was in prison, but he was enjoying because God was with him right there. You understand?
I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it.
You see, this king, he says, I've heard about you. I've heard about you, Joseph. I've heard people are talking about, because he had a very special spirit of God, because he gloried in worshiping God. Everywhere where he was, whether he was in prison, he still held on to the hand of God. Yeah?
And Pharaoh told the dream to Joseph. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. The
now,
seven good kind.
A man of God called, he just said, God has shown Pharaoh. Yeah? It's who showed you that dream? It's God. You understand? God had showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. So Pharaoh was being given a prophecy of something which was supposed to be done by God. Do you understand? And what? The seven good.
The seven good kind are 7 years.
Right?
And the seven thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years.
And what caused Joseph to say that? The Spirit of God. And what?
Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt.
Right?
And they shall arise after them.
Was it not a benefit to have a prophet? If Joseph wasn't there in the land of Egypt, what was going to happen on the 7 years of famine? Because if 7 years of plenty, they wouldn't have gathered the corn to feed the whole world. Because there was a prophet, they didn't perish. Where there is no prophet, people will perish. This is true. It's a true saying, you know. They were saved because Joseph was there. Right?
Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous.
Right?
And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls, and he gathered up all the food of the 7 years, which were in the land of Egypt. And
you see how intelligent Pharaoh was? He knew God has explained through Joseph. So the only way I can achieve this plan is use Joseph. He's intelligent. It's not like some people, oh, you want to take too much to yourself, so you think you know why are you telling me this dream is useless, and with unbelief, and will cause the whole earth to be hungry because of thickness in the brain. But Pharaoh wasn't like that. Pharaoh knew that God had spoken through Joseph. Now, because of this, Joseph, I will use you to make sure you collect as much corn so that when the years of famine come, the whole world was fed because of Joseph. You thank Joseph for being there in that century. For the whole world was fed by Egypt. Right? And what? Mm-hmm.
And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years, which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities. The food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same.
Right?
And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much until he left numbering.
I'm sure
For
they were seeing Joseph doing all that job. They did not know what he was up to. But that's what a prophet does. He's told by God to do something which men do not understand. But when the time comes, when they wanted to use that corn which had been gathered by Joseph, they understood this is a man of God. This man was inspired by God to do this action. So they were saved by a prophet. They were saved. Now, let's read. We shall endeavor to bring enough evidence.
We shall endeavor to bring enough evidence in this study.
Wait there. Start where it says, while the Exodus movement was a great movement.
While the Exodus movement was a great movement, the second Advent movement will be still
greater. Did you see that? So this promises us that there is a second, because we have seen it in Isaiah 11, where people will also walk on dry land like they did in the Red Sea. So we should prepare ourselves for a second Exodus. If then our worship has nothing to do with the second Exodus, then we cannot profess and say we are Israel by promise. Israel by promise should be ready for the second Exodus. It is there in the Bible. We see it. We have a copy in the Old. And we have, Isaiah mentioned, even people going on dry shod, like they did in the Red Sea. We have a second Exodus, because the first one was a copy of the second one. And we are being told the second one will be very greater than the first one. The second one is greater. Why? Isaiah 11 said, how many streams were opened? 7 streams. And yet, in Moses' time, they only had one stream, the Red Sea. And then Jordan when they went in. But here, Isaiah 11 told us 7 streams, 11 verse 15 says 7 streams. So if it is 7, do you understand it's going to be greater? It's greater than the first one, right? Right.
God will take out a people, not from one nation only,
no,
but from every nation under heaven.
Right.
And he will lead them into the heavenly Canaan.
Is it true? Now let's go. We want to prove that point. Let's go to to Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 14, chapter 8, and start from verse 19.
Verse 19. Thus says the Lord of hosts. The first of the fourth month.
Verse 20. Start from verse 20.
Thus says the Lord of hosts. It shall yet come to pass.
We want to prove the point that are we going to come from different countries in the second Exodus?
Thus says the Lord of hosts. It shall yet come to pass,
right,
that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities.
Many cities. We were told here that the second Exodus will not come from only one country, which is Egypt, but from many countries or many nations. Now, we are proving it from Zechariah chapter 8, verse 20. It says, read it again.
Thus says the Lord of hosts.
Right.
It shall yet come to pass that there shall come people and the inhabitants of many cities, and the inhabitants of one city shall go to another, saying, let us go speedily to pray before the Lord, and to seek the Lord of hosts.
Right.
I will go also.
And they won't be saying, why? Why should we go to Jerusalem? Why? But they just say, I will go also. These are the Gentiles joining in the movement, which is which will be going to seek the Lord and pray in Jerusalem. And what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem.
Did you hear this second Exodus? Many people, strong nations, will come and worship in Jerusalem.
And to pray. Before the Lord. That says the Lord. In those days. It shall come to pass.
Right.
That 10 men. Shall take hold out of all languages of the nation.
All languages of the nation.
Even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying.
The Jews at that time will be 144,000. They will be sent to all these Gentile countries to make sure this second Exodus is enhanced. So they will take out hold of this 144,000 or this Jew and what?
Saying, we will go with you. For we have heard that God is with you.
You understand, when God comes to establish the kingdom, this is what will happen. The second Exodus will be there, resumed, when people will be taken to go to worship God in the kingdom. Do you understand? Now, tell me if this has happened before. If you've seen people coming from many nations, or we have heard the history of the Israelites coming from only one nation, which is Egypt. But here we are being told many nations, they will come to worship God. They will go speedily, strong nations, to worship God in Jerusalem. Did we hear that? If we heard that, are we preaching that? Are we ready for that? Are we ready for the second Exodus? If we are not ready for the second Exodus, how then should we say we are Israel by promise? Israel by promise should be preparing for this incident which has been well chronicled in the Bible. It's not from hearsay, it's from our own Bible. It's something which will happen in those days. It is in the last days. Do you understand? It's not a past thing, and this is the Old Testament, which we say, let's not read the Old Testament, but it's got our future incidences, events that are in the future. So if you cut the Old Testament, now what about the events that are coming? What will you do? Now here, let's go back to where you left it, this Advent movement.
So this Advent movement, of which the Exodus movement was a type, we believe was foretold in prophecy in the following steering language.
Right.
It shall come to pass in that day.
Right.
That
now,
the Lord.
That is a verse which we are reading, isn't it? Now we have read one verse which is promising this Exodus. Right. Read that one.
It shall come to pass in that day.
Right.
That the Lord shall set his hand again the second time.
Now, that one is from Review and Herald. Review and Herald, October 10, 1929, page 4 and 5. Right? That is where we get that. Start on it. It shall come to pass.
It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time.
In our own books, this Exodus is there. Right?
To recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left.
Right?
There shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, like as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt.
Which verse is that? It's Isaiah 11. Now, Review and Herald is commenting on that Isaiah 11, isn't it? Read from Isaiah 11. Go to the page Isaiah 11. Start from 13. What does it say from 13? Right. 15.
Verse 15. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptians, say, and with his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it into 7 streams,
right,
and make men go over dry shod.
Right.
And there shall be an highway for the remnant
that
of
is
his
his
people,
highway. That's Review and Herald is talking about.
which shall be left,
right,
from Assyria, like
right,
as it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt.
Do you see what Review and Herald is talking? It's quoting that verse, and is talking about it here. There shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, like it was to Israel in the day that he came up out of the land of Egypt. So, Review and Herald is telling us about the second Exodus, isn't it? Now I say, who is Israel? Who is Israel by promise? The spiritual Israel. Review and Herald is talking to spiritual Israel, who will be in the second Exodus, isn't it? Now, who is it? Who is that? So we are talking about spiritual Israel. Are we preaching this one, the second Exodus? Then we are not then, if we are not preaching about the second Exodus. Because that's what the Israel, who is exactly the same as the Israel by flesh, will be doing in the time of the end. Will be in a second Exodus. Exactly how they walked. Now we have 7 streams. You know, when you go to Jeremiah chapter 23, go to verse 6 and 7. At that time, they will now be saying, they won't be talking about coming out of one city. They will be talking about come out of many cities. I mean, many countries instead of one country.
Verse 7. Therefore, behold, the days come,
right?
Saith the Lord,
right?
That they shall no more say,
they shall
the
no
Lord
more
liveth.
Say. Now, the Israelites, when they went out of Egypt, they were saying, the Lord liveth, and what?
Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that they shall no more say, the Lord liveth, which brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt.
They won't anymore say, oh, the Lord liveth, who brought us up from Egypt. What do they say?
But the Lord liveth, which brought up and which led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country,
right,
and from all countries,
right,
whither I had driven them,
right,
and they shall dwell in their own land.
You understand? There is a time when they will say, the Lord liveth, who brought us up from all these countries where we had been driven. We were talking about the Israelites, the 10 tribes, isn't it? And then there are 2 tribes of Judah. The 10 tribes are not there, are not in Israel right now. They are scattered all over in all these Gentile countries. But how will they go back? Well, how are they going to go back to their land? It's in the second Exodus, as sealed people in the 144,000 group. That's how they will go back. Israel, 10 tribes, now will mix with the 2 tribes who will be under. And then now, instead, Israel has never, since the time of Solomon, it has never stayed with 12 tribes. It is only having 2 tribes, and part of them only, who came back from Babylonian captivity. But 10 tribes were driven all over the world. Everywhere, they're not there. But how are they going to be saved right from these Gentile countries straight going to heaven? Or they will have to come back as 144,000. We are seeing them now on the sealing process in Revelation 7. We see that all the 12,000 are coming from each tribe of Israel. 12,000 from 12,000 from this tribe of Israel, from each one, to make an aggregate number of 144,000. So these 12 tribes, they go back in a second Exodus. But I'm saying, who are they? Who are they? Yeah, who are they? They are the 144,000. Are you in the number? That's why Sister said, strive by all your means to enter into that number, because that number is the spiritual Israel, the Israel by promise. But let's study and see exactly our point where we are and see what is Israel by promise. Now, not if you have nothing to do with the Exodus, forget, my dear, forget. That's not Israel by promise. But you should be having the second Exodus as a syllabus where you are, because it's there in the Bible. So who is going to preach it? If it is there, nobody's preaching it. Who is going to? The only ones who are going to preach it are the ones in the sealing process of the 144,000. They have this, and until they go back in a second Exodus and stand with Christ on Mount Zion as 144,000 with the lamp. So that's how they got there. But who is Israel? By promise. Now we could be seeing people calling themselves, we are Israel, we are the true Israel, we are the true spiritual one, we are the one, the sons of Abraham, we are the one. But we have a design of them to identify them. The design is in their second Exodus. That's their design. You can't identify them anywhere else apart from what the Israel by flesh was doing. And then if they're Israel by spirit, then we will see a matching from their forefathers. Because it's there, Corinthians says, it is theirs and sample to us until the ends come. It's us. So we should know exactly how to identify them. You understand? So let's read on. The Exodus.
The Exodus movement is in a way a type or a photograph of the closing work of God under the Advent movement.
Right. This is coming from a book called Certainties of the Advent Movement by Waggoner, right? W.A. Spicer, right? W.A. In the New Estate you find it. W.A. Spicer, Certainties of the Advent Movement. It was there with our pioneers. It was the second Exodus was there, but we lost it somewhere when we rejected A.T. Jones and Waggoner. We lost it, and now which movement we represent, nobody knows. We are something else. But who is Israel by promise? We should know. Now repeat that quotation. The Exodus movement.
The Exodus movement is in a way a type.
A photograph. Which is the type? It's a photograph
of the closing work of God under the Advent movement.
Right. That Exodus movement should be a closing work of God under the Advent movement. Now, if the Advent movement should close with an Exodus, how far are we from this close? We are already talking about going to heaven. Where is this movement, which is a closing work of the Advent? It's coming from W.A. Spicer, Certainties of Advent Movement by W.A. Spicer. So, if it is a closing work for the Advent people, why are we not hearing about it? So then, who is Israel by promise? Who is this one who is going to close the Advent movement with the Exodus? Who is it going to do this Exodus? If we do, each one is just preaching his own thing, nothing to do with the Advent movement or with the Exodus movement. And yet our scriptures show that this is the final phase of the Advent movement. So where are we? Where are we? Now, let's read their experience. The fact that Israel, right?
The fact that Israel after the flesh is a type or photograph, their experience must be duplicated by the true.
Right?
Otherwise, there can be no type.
There is no type. Now, whatever you are doing, if there is no type of what you are doing, then you should know exactly you are lost. You are getting lost. You have to come off that way and go back to the way. When Christ says, Sister White says in Testimonies for the Church, volume 5, page 217, the church has left Christ a leader and steadily going back to Egypt. He means that they are no longer having the Exodus movement. That's what he means. Now, let's read. Maybe you can say, I know this quotation by head. And people are always suspicious of being led astray, but when they are led astray, they do not understand they are being led astray. Because they are already, when they are not in the Exodus movement, they are led astray already. Now, read on 2:17. Where did they leave Christ, their leader? The church.
The church
has
turned back from following Christ, a leader.
Right?
And is steadily retreating toward Egypt.
Now, how will they come? You remember the Korahs and Datans. They always wanted to go back to Egypt. They always wanted, they didn't want to proceed. The 10 spies, they didn't want to proceed. That's the state we are in. If we want to go back to Egypt, living Christ with the pillar of fire by night and the cloud by day, where was he? He was in the Exodus movement, going back to Jerusalem. Yeah, this is why Sister White uttered that statement, that they have left Christ and steadily going back to Egypt. Why? They left the movement. And we are seeing that the Advent people, their last phase of Advent movement is the Exodus. So where is that? Where is that? Now, our question is, who is it? Who is Israel by promise? Who is it? Now, we're going to study. This will get a lot of lessons behind this topic until we actually find out where we are and when are we going to be ready for Christ? How are we going to make ourselves ready for Christ? What is it going to be like when he comes? Now, this should lead us. This lesson is so interesting. It should lead us to knowing exactly where we are. Have we lost the radar, or are we still in the radar? Or is the plane still flying like a butterfly anyway? It takes any message any time. But God is so definite with any message of each period. In the time of Noah, he was definite it was the building of the ark. In the time of Lot, he was definite it was the coming out of Sodom. In our time, he is definite it is the second Exodus. So where are you there? Where are you? And in a definite message, where is this Exodus movement? Where is it? Where we should come off from all these countries and say, the Lord liveth, who brought us all from all these nations to go and worship him and be with him in this kingdom. May God bless us when we are prying into this kingdom message, into the time it's going to be established, into how it should be like, where do we identify those who are going to come, where we are going to read and study together from the spirit of prophets to the Bible, the spirit of prophets, weighing evidence, Good News Bible, King James Bible, wherever we are, may God bless us all and blessed new moon for everyone, so that we enjoy the month of Kislev, the 9th month, with the spiritual blessing. Thank you for all for listening.